First. Okay, here we go. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Isabella. I'm the founder of Light Networking, which is a mentoring and networking initiative for women and non-binary people in the creative industries. This is a very special session that we're doing. One of our former mentees is going to interview her then mentor, Isabella. And Amelia is also part of the Light Networking community, which is a membership scheme launched earlier this year. And part of the idea of the community is that members can shape the content according to their interests. So Amelia is very into fashion and fashion history and lots of other things. And she thought it would be a nice idea to take over Light Networking's Instagram and do a bit of a overview or her take, let's say, on London Fashion Week and also on Paris Fashion Week, which is happening a bit further on this year. So with that said, she's curating a series of programs. She's doing lots and lots of things on her Instagram. It's going to be very exciting. Just so everybody knows, this interview and this session is going to be recorded and it's going to be posted on our YouTube. So at the end of the session, we're going to have time for Q&A. If during the conversation you have questions you want answered, just pop them in the chat. But before that, please also tell us where you're from and what is it that you do, and give us a handle, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever. It's very important that whenever you come to a virtual event, whatever it is, that you try to connect with some other attendees. It's always a great opportunity for you to expand your network. And we're looking forward to know more about you. Amelia is also going to tell you all at the end about everything else happening today. So don't worry about it. And with that said, I'm very, very, very happy to have Isabella here. She's one of our 2020 and 2021 mentors. Yes. She is a great friend of mine and a really exciting person all around. She's a massive museum rat. She'll tell you all about it. She studies a lot. She teaches a lot. She does a lot of things. She loves objects way more than people. So I'm very blessed that she's here with us today. But with that said, Amelia and Isabella, please take over. I'll be here in the background managing expectations. So thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that lovely intro, Belle. And yeah, first and foremost, thank all of you for coming. As Belle said, my name is Amelia O'Mahony-Brady. I'm a fashion researcher, a curator in training based in Dublin. And yeah, as has already been covered, a very proud mentee turned community member of Light Networking. And I am thrilled that I have been enabled to, sit down and have this chat with Isabella, because as you'll come to see, during the 4-month stint that she was mentoring me, I just never wanted it to end. So, secretly, this is kind of just my scapegoat for having more conversations with her about fashion and dress. And so thank you for enabling me. But hopefully, of course, I want it to be an informative session for anyone listening. And as Belle said, any questions that you have for Isabella, please do pop them in the chat or note them down, and I'll control myself to the point that we'll have enough time at the end to go through the Q&A and all of that. So yeah, to just quickly kick us off, I guess, to use Belle's favorite phrase, as anyone who's spoken to me over the past few months knows, the experience that I had being mentored by Isabella was, nothing short of life-changing. And I feel like, really, we're barely like 2 minutes in, and I know the gushing is just it's gonna keep coming. But there's so many reasons why. And if I probably listed all of them, we'd be here for way longer than an hour. But I think the thing that's perhaps the most relevant for any, prospective applicants to the program listening, any fellow enthusiasts of fashion and dress, was that obviously the pandemic, for anyone who wants, like myself, to enter into working with fashion museums, working with dress collections, it's not exactly made it the most feasible in terms of placement opportunities. Placement opportunities, I guess, again, speaking with Ireland, it would not have been possible at all during this time. And in other places, even if restrictions have been less severe, I'm sure they've been delayed and compromised. So yes, to start us off with with a question, I suppose. I remember when we were organizing this talk, I was thinking back in September when I think the mentoring sessions had barely started at that point. Maybe we were one session in, and there was a podcast that Isabella did with Isabel to inaugurate the I Like Networking podcast. It was the very first episode. It's something actually that if any of you watching this now haven't listened to, I'd highly recommend you check it out. Maybe we could even pop it in the chat at the end or at some point. But yeah, that line that Isabella said about liking objects more than people, that was one of those moments where I knew this is my kind of person, completely. This is someone that I'm going to really, really relate to. But there were so many things that came out of that podcast that at least a couple of them I'd love to maybe expand upon a little bit while we're chatting. The first of which being, you cited your formative university experiences. You spoke about doing this fantastic fashion design degree in, if I'm remembering right, Santa Marcelina in Sao Paulo, where you're originally from, and also your MA in museum studies at UCL in London. Now, there was also a BA in between the two of those in fashion history and theory, which was also very influential. I mean, you're literally teaching on this course in Central St. Martin's now. But I suppose I honed in on those first two courses in particular because I feel like they really testify how beneficial it can be to study a broader degree. It can allow you to explore different areas and topics of interest that you might not have been exposed to otherwise. So I swear this has all been leading up to a question. If you could, could you elaborate on how those two courses in particular have impacted your professional development up to this point?
Yes, okay. Whew. That was a lot to introduce the question, but Amelia, before I answer your question, which is fantastic, thank you for asking it. I just want to reciprocate the love, and I miss Amelia every day. Our sessions were really the highlight. She would bring rainbows when it was cold and dark outside, or it was sunny outside and there were still rainbows coming from Amelia. So I really, really loved sharing that first experience with you, and I'm so pleased that you just launching into this amazing person that you already are, but it's now becoming more visible for the world to see. And I also have to apologize to all of you that my partner decided that he had a meeting right now. So if you if you hear him in the background, we'll just remember that we're all having to do compromises, and he is intruding on us. It's not me on him. Yeah, okay. But anyway, so going back to the question, yes, so as both you and Belle said, I love studying. I'm a very academic person. I've always been. While I know other people learn from doing, I learned from sitting down and reading books and doing assignments and things like that. I really thrive on this environment. I love it. And then, so I decided to study a lot of different things throughout my life, all interconnected somehow, but each one with its own perspective. And when I first decided to study fashion design, I've always been a very creative person, always loved fashion and creating clothes and paintings and things like that. So fashion design felt a very natural kind of place for me to be. And I really, really did at one point wanted to be a fashion designer. And I loved that particular experience was really enriching in my life because it was tough. First and foremost, it was tough. I mean, studying fashion design, if anybody thinks is about learning how to buy nice clothes, I mean, you couldn't be further from the truth. It's actually a very, very demanding, I shared everything. I shared tears, I shared blood, from cutting myself and sewing myself. And it's intense, but it's also about self-discovery. I think with any particular creative field, you don't have anything to base yourself. It's always coming from within, and coming from letting your identity really shine through your creations. And that's not just for fashion design. I mean, it could be a dancer, it could be a painter, it could be whatever, a musician, it's always about what's within. And that was very much honed into my experience learning fashion design. It was always about who you are and how you're translating your experiences through the medium of dress, in the case of fashion design, but it could have been any other medium. And that was very important. I also learned very quickly that fashion design was not for me. That said, I loved it, and I was, I had good experiences, but I didn't like the industry, and I didn't like necessarily the timing of things. I used to joke I had a big head and small hands, and that meant I really loved thinking and considering and pondering and critically, thinking about my surroundings and my identity and how that was being reflected in things. And then that left me with little time to actually do the stuff. And for anybody that is in this industry, you have to create collections. It's not just 2 collections, it's 6 collections a year. And it's all about, there's a lot of money involved with it. And, and although that I thought it was very boring, and really the pressure wasn't for me. It really wasn't. So in the meantime, I always were passionate about history. In fact, fashion history were my favorite subjects while studying fashion design. We had 3 years of fashion history in my university in Brazil, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I once wanted to be an archaeologist. So everything was coming into play, and because it was also about self-discovery and really getting to know who you are, I feel like during this experience I realized I am an academic person and I love history more than anything else, and this is why I moved to the UK, so I could pursue a career in museums. And I thought to do so I needed to then learn fashion history more into details, and fashion theory and how we think about it. But having studied fashion design also allowed me to understand objects. And you cannot talk about being a curator in a museum environment. I mean, there are different types of curators, and some curators don't necessarily have to work with objects, right? It's mostly for museum curatorship. That gave me a big advantage when it came to all my other classmates, because none of them had ever engaged with objects the way I had. Because you're making the objects, you really know about construction, you really know about, materials, and how that will, the relationship with the body. I mean, talk about the body when you're studying fashion design, the body is the center of it. So that really gave me, I think, a big advantage, because I really understood the materiality of fashion history and how important that was. And then obviously when I went and did my museum studies, MA, I felt I was already in a very good place, because I had then combined theory, history, critical analysis with a big focus on objects. And to me, that was always my favorite part. Working in museums, it was not about doing exhibitions. Many people dream about doing exhibitions, and I felt those were actually not the best experiences. To me, it was always about the everyday of working with objects. So yeah, I mean, don't know where I'm going with this. So Amelia,
no, it's just, can I make a comment also that isn't it just such a joy to listen to Isabella talking about things? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm still so smitten. I always will be, but I have to let it out. I have to let it out. No, it's true. I just felt like it was an important thing to highlight, because I myself, in my experiences, I'm in the midst of I'm on research sabbatical at the moment, but I will be going into my final year of something that is by no means a traditional fashion degree. I'm studying art history and Italian, and I suppose I wanted you to of course articulate your experiences, but also to maybe just have an indication to anyone out there who isn't studying something that they feel maybe directly links to what they would like to do outside of college. You can find parallels and entryways in ways that you wouldn't anticipate. I mean, I've been very indulged by my lecturers, but you know, essentially all the modules I've been doing, I've been able to take fashion approaches to it. And I feel like actually looking at fashion from non-traditionally associated fashion perspectives has been helpful. So yeah, it was even that note in itself to, you know, do be creative for any students out there. Find ways in which you can adapt your module contents to the things, you know, creatively that you're really excited about. So I feel like I can, in terms of the next question, I feel like I have the right to say this, having been your mentee over those few months. But I really feel in the conversations we've had, but also things you've discussed with Isabel, that one of the many reasons why you're such a fantastic mentor is that you are just so fully understanding of both sides of the mentor-mentee dynamic. I mean, we've spoken you've spoken so warmly about this cohort of talented women that have served as mentors, and I think with one of them, Beatrice, you described her as a what was it, careers godmother?
Yeah,
I think,
she
and
is.
which I thought was just such a lovely way. It just, again, is just so indicative of the obviously the lovely relationship that the two of you have. So I suppose I'd love to ask what ingredients you think are needed in an ideal dynamic between a mentee and a mentor, you know, a relationship that benefits both people involved.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And yes, I have had fantastic mentors in my life, and I still do. And, you know, I don't think I would have accomplished anything that I have accomplished if it wasn't for the people supporting me and believing in me and pushing. So I cannot stress how important it is to have somebody in your life that might be in a different stage, potentially in a place that you want to be one day, to really be there to guide you. And I think for me, and this is what I try to do with you, Amelia, is always to create that relationship first, because at the end of the day, a mentorship is about trust. You know, it's about getting to know each other and really understanding what each one can bring to the table. It's always a two-way stream, a partnership, a mentor scheme. It's never about one person teaching another and the other being a passive receiver and this one an active agent. It's all about share, you know, and both getting something out of it. And I mean, I can spend the day talking about everything that I learned by working with Amelia. And you know, it's never just a one-way stream. It comes both ways. But I think in order to do that, you have to create that relationship. You have to have trust, and you have to have an understanding of the needs of that person and what that person can bring to the table. And I think it goes both ways. I mean, I have to say, Amelia was a little bit of a stalker when we first started.
So true. Hey, it works, guys. Go for it. No, I'm not advocating stalking. Oh my God. Anyway, I'll let you continue.
But like, she already knew a lot about me, which I think it helped, because, you know, I felt I was coming here to a relationship where I didn't have to pretend to be anything, you know. And I think it worked the same with Amelia. Day one, I asked her, like, who are you? You know, let's get to know each other. And I think that first session was very much about, you know, what our fears and our challenges, and, you know, what has worked so far, what hasn't, where are we struggling, and really to get to know each other and really understand what do you want to get out of here. I think that was the first question that I asked Amelia. What do you want out of this? And then I built the whole program around what Amelia needed and wanted, and that I could share as well. And at the same time, Amelia would come like with questions that were very perceptive of, you know, I had to really look inside me and think like, oh, what am I trying to get out of this as well? And who am I? And what is this? You know, it's about getting to know each other. But I think the number one, and this also happened with my mentors, it was always having first and foremost that personal relationship. And it doesn't need to be a friendship. It doesn't need to be, you know, really extended outside of the environment. It just so happened that I did create very good relationships with my mentors, and I would go for dinner with them and, you know, go to their houses and things like that. But it's really about creating that personal connection. And I think that's also the key for networking. You know, so many people tend to feel networking, it's about just getting contacts and what they can do for my own personal enhancement. But no, actually networking is about establishing relationships that might not necessarily be focused on one particular objective right now, but it's about knowing that you're growing your sphere of action. And my work is all about collaborations, you know, as a curator, but also as a tutor now, as a lecturer. It's about collaborating with the students. So, and you know, when I think of networking, I think about expanding my universe and knowing that at one point I will be collaborating with those people. It might not be now, might be a project that I know about, but it's the future, you know, it's building bridges. So when the time comes, you have the contacts, you have the skills, you have those that help and the guidance. So I think that's, for me, what makes a mentorship good, is the relationship.
Absolutely, Isa. I mean, I think you touched upon all of the essential points. I'd be entirely in agreement. And again, to quickly say for any prospective applicants to the program, if it isn't already apparent by everything that Isabella's just said, I mean, there really is no, you know, hierarchical structure between mentor and mentee at all. I mean, it was such a lovely boost for me, you know, going in, because yes, okay, I've been working with, you know, fashion magazines over the past sort of, well, 5+ years now. But when it came to going into this area, as I say, working in, you know, potential fashion museums and archives, I was a complete newcomer. I had absolutely no experience, only curiosity and excitement about it. And from day one, Isabella really made me feel like my opinion and my thoughts were valued and they mattered. And yeah, and it's one of the most wonderful things that you can do for someone who, you know, is making their first kind of tentative steps into a new field. I think when you were talking about the importance of, you know, collaborative projects and just collaboration as a whole, it made me think about how the I Like Networking ethos is, you know, the overarching philosophy is collaboration over competition, which, as you said, it's, you know, it is something that you operate with as well. I suppose if you could, is there any advice that you would give to anyone who's navigating the museum sector at the moment, be it within dress or other museums, that are trying to contend with, you know, competitive atmospheres? As you've mentioned before, even pre-COVID, oftentimes there would be dynamics where the people around you, you were all, you know, fighting for the next contract. So naturally the pandemic is only going to have compounded that situation. So I suppose, how would you offer a little bit of, I don't know, supportive words for anyone trying to deal with that and trying to, in the midst of all of this, find supportive connections, you know, and mutually beneficial connections?
Yeah, that's something that I still, I mean, it's something that I have to deal with till today. And as you said, with the pandemic, it will be harder, but especially for curators in museums, it's tough. It's not a forgiving industry. There are a lot of people that want to do it. There are a lot of people that deserve to do it. They have the skills, they have the interest, but there are not enough places. And that's just a reality. You know, you cannot, you can do everything right. You can do the masters, the programs, you know, the experience. It just is a fact. There are not enough jobs for the amount of people that want to work in the industry. So when you do manage to get in, it's not just, okay, that's it, whew, you know, now I'm safe. It's not, because there's so much. Many museums, especially with curatorial positions, is about temporary contracts. I think, thank goodness, we're seeing a shift from this trend, and more museums now are hiring permanent positions. But especially for my entire career working in museums for the last 10 years, it has been all about shorter contracts. It was very, very, very rare to see a permanent position coming up. And the 2 times that it did happen, it was because the curator actually died. You know, I'm not just being dramatic. That's how people were getting their permanent positions. Everything else was short contract. And then, you know, even within the museum, you had maybe 2-3 assistants, and was one position advertised and you were all going for it. And I struggled with that because I'm a people pleaser. You know, I like building relationships. I'm not very competitive when it comes to kind of fighting for something. I will fight by doing my best, but I've never been one of those that, you know, put their careers above everything else. And there are a lot of people that are like this in the museum industry, and I have seen firsthand, you know, people that I thought they were friends, when it came to fighting for a contract, you realize actually, you know, this is where the relationship kind of stopped. So it was something that I had to, you know, deal with it, and it still happens. That said, some of my best friends are people that I worked with, so it's not everybody like this. They're both sides. They're the people that are incredibly supportive, and I mean, I do have people that I worked with that, you know, they would do everything for me and I would do everything for them. But then you also have, it is a reality, there is this side of competitiveness and people that will do everything. And I don't think it's just for museums, it's in all industries where there is a scarcity of positions and a lot of people wanting to do that. There's always going to be competition. My way of doing things, and this is, I don't know if it's the best way, I don't know even if it's the most effective way, but it's the way that I did. And it was always about thinking, you know what, at the end of the day, there is a position for everybody. And if this position is not for me, it's because it's for somebody else, you know, but there will be a place for me. And that is still a thing. I mean, it's a little bit woo-woo, you know, it sounds a little bit woo-woo, but it's how I live by. And it kind of gives you a sense of calm because, you know, you have agency to a certain extent. And then there's also something bigger and above that it knows where the place for you is. And, you know, I have applied, I mean, I have had great jobs and really amazing, you know, roles, and working curator at the V&A with dress collection. That is, you know, a dream for many people. So I know I have been very fortunate, but I also have done interviews where I didn't get the job. And every time it's harsh, you know, I have to say, every time I didn't get a job, there were tears. Every time, you know, after 10 years, I would still cry when I wouldn't get the job. But then I would always remind myself, that wasn't for me, that wasn't a place for me, that was the place for somebody else. And I'm glad that person got that. You know, I like to think that it's a system and we're all interconnected. So it's not about my success over somebody else, it's about all of our successes together. So that's something that I tend to think, especially when it comes to a very competitive environment. I always try to remember there is a place for me. That said, it's also about hard work. You know, the more you build a reputation of being a good employee, a good team worker, very rare to find a career where you're going to be a rock in an island. You know, in most careers, especially in the creative field, you're always going to be collaborating. So showing that you're a strong team player, I think that has always helped, you know, showing that even with the difficult ones, I was able to work with them, you know, even if going home, I would swear my face off and, you know, kind of be angry about whatever they said or did. But when it came to the working environment, I could be professional and I could build those relationships. And that is always noticed. You know, if you're that person that is dependable, people notice. And I have to say, the best jobs that I've ever had, including my current lecture at Central St. Martin's, they always came by somebody referring me. They always came by somebody saying, you would be perfect for this job, let's get you there. You know, so if you can show you can do things, and you're hardworking, you're committed, you're responsible, you're a good team player, positions will come, no matter how competitive the environment is. It's all about showing that you can do it, and then the right place will come. And, you know, building those relationships, they will also help you get there.
Absolutely. Oh, like, again, hearing you talk, I feel like I'm transported back to our mentoring sessions, and I feel like I keep on having this thing of going, Amelia, why are you not taking down notes for all of this? Because I mean, honestly, it's, you know, I'm sure the others listening feel the same, but I just, the whole ethos through which you operate, I think, is something that people can take away with them, irrespective of what sector they work in. You know, I think it's and the swearing on the way back, that's catharsis. That's how you get the balance, honestly. So perfectly healthy in my book.
Well, I'm also I have a very potty mouth. Like I'm a swearer. I
Oh,
I
I
talk
get it.
sweet, and I am tiny, but man, I can swear like a sailor.
Oh my God. I'm so glad we established that like early on, because I was like, well, now I feel enabled. If something slips out during our sessions, it's not going to be like, you know, such a big deal. So again, thank you for enabling me on that. So I mean, okay, we're obviously all pretty aware of the limitations and the restrictions posed by the pandemic on the sector and all manner of sectors over the past year. And whilst not in any way romanticizing, you know, the past 12 months, also because no two households have obviously had the same experience. Do you feel, when it comes to dress museums and institutions, that there will be some positive long-term developments? Because I mean, I think about our last session, I think we, and for, you know, over the course of the sessions, we did speak about, you know, how these places were already looking to shift a bit more digitally, engage a bit more digitally. And obviously there was even an even stronger impetus than ever when all of this started happening with COVID. So do you feel there will be some upsides like that?
I again, might sound a little woo-woo, but I feel everything that comes in this life, there's two sides of it. There's always a silver lining for everything, and hopefully humanity is learning from what we're going through right now in terms of our relationship with nature, with the environment, with each other. So I do feel, even though it has been horrendous and so many people lost too much during this, and I'm not just talking about jobs, I'm talking about people, you know, people that they loved. It has been painful process, and I think we all have had somehow or another been affected by the pandemic. I do like to think that we're also learning things here, and you know, there is there can be positives coming out of this. And I think with museums in particular, yes, I mean, museums, they have been kind of focusing on digital for the last, I would say, 20 years, you know, with collections online, with more materials. But I think the pandemic was really a boost. And for me, there are good things about digital and there are bad things about digital. I mean, when you talk about collections, it's about the physicality. We will never be able to accomplish that impact that a visitor has when he first encounters a particular object, that you can never do digitally. That experience can only happen in the physical. So the digital is not perfect, but I think digital allows for an accessibility and inclusivity that perhaps the physical cannot easily achieve. So with the pandemic, museums had to close in many countries. You know, they had to stay safely closed. And I think there has been a lot of creativity in how they can still engage with their audiences, how they can still continue the academic studies, the research, and, you know, getting that research, that knowledge, that experience out there. And I think the pandemic really allowed museums to be creative on how they were doing, because although they have been engaging with digital for most part of the last 20 years, at times, especially in the last, I would say, 5 years, it has been very stagnated, the advancement, or it has become a little bit a formula. And I think the pandemic kind of spin things a little bit, and now curators are having to be more creative on how they talk about objects. I think we also have to remember that the pandemic coincided with a big push towards, you know, issues in terms of racism in society. So the pandemic, in the spirit of the pandemic in the last year, we've also seen, you know, talks about Black Lives Matter, about racism, about institutional racism and the effects of colonialism, and all those big kind of subjects that have a big impact into our lives, they're directly connected to museums. I mean, museums are 19th century. For any of you that don't know the history of museums, they are 19th century idea, concept. So they really started in the 19th century, and it was about power relationships. It was about certain nations and, in the West, showing their superiority towards other nations and showing them through objects. So we cannot disengage or disassociate museums from this kind of dark side of their history. And I think with the pandemic, and also with all the kind of social change that we're witnessing right now, museums have been reconsidering how they tell stories, who is talking, which voices they are, enabling to speak, to be heard. What is the curator? Who is the curator? What is that object? I think there has been a lot of change, and the digital has helped this change as well. So I think it's an interesting moment, not just because of the pandemic, but also the bigger social moment that we're living. And this has been really changing the way museums operate. And hopefully it's for the best, and it's a positive change that will stay. It's not just a temporary kind of solution for pandemic.
No, absolutely. I mean, God, you've so aptly touched upon, two topics that I really wanted to explore with you. And, we already have in part just by virtue of your words. And Belle, obviously, if we have any questions coming through at any point, feel free to because I'll just keep going. It's dangerous. I'll keep on.
No, if any questions come up, I'll interject, but at the moment, no one has said anything. So you can continue on your list, Amelia, because it's quite extensive.
But yes, I would just say I love discussions. So, if you have anything that you want to add, I don't shy away from controversy or difficult subjects, as you can probably see. So if you do have something that is touching upon you here that I've said that you want to make a comment, share your experience, I mean, go ahead. This is a space for us to share, not just for you to listen to me and beautiful Amelia.
Oh, I think Sophie actually popped something in the chat there. I can't see whether or not there's a question mark, but it's
now we have one. Okay,
cool.
About mentorships, what would you say your top tip or tips would be to make the most of the time you have together? But I have to be honest, I don't want to ask because I love the history of museums and fashion history discussion.
We got to do a series or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, let's definitely talk about that, about the mentorship. I think one top tip from each one of you on how to make the most of your time together. That's always helpful, I guess.
Yeah, I think for me, and that was actually part of the guidelines that Belle shared when we were training to be mentors. And one of them was, stipulate day one, the first thing you do, what you want to get out of this. What are your goals? Because it was wonderful. When I asked Amelia first, we met, I said, who are you? And then I was like, so what do you want to get out of this? That moment, I knew exactly how to plan for the mentorship program, for the 4 sessions that we had together. I knew exactly how to make the most out of it. And it's because Amelia was very honest about what she wanted to get out of it. And I was also very honest about what I wanted as well to get out of this experience. I think that was key to the success of our sessions together, because I knew Amelia said, well, I really want to work in museums. That was her experience. And Amelia, if you don't mind me sharing a little bit, I asked, what do you want to get out of this experience? And she was like, well, I'm a student, I'm very interested in fashion history, and I do want to work in museums with dress collections, but right now I cannot get an internship, and I never worked with collections before. To me, that was key, because I knew then, okay, what we need to do here is, first of all, understand what it means to work in a museum with dress collections, how we can use the skills that you already have in order to get there, but also what do you need to know before you even get into a museum? You know, those are things that a curator, before getting an intern or a volunteer or, you know, an assistant, they will expect you to already know. So, and this is how I built the program. It was about, you know, okay, this session we're going to talk about this section will, based on my experience when I was starting working in museums, and also my experience hiring volunteers and interns and assistants. What do I expect from them? And so here's what I'm going to give it to you, Amelia. So I think that was, to me, that was crucial in order for us to get the most out of it. It was really about understanding what were the needs and what each of us wanted to get out of.
I mean, absolutely. I'm not sure if I can even add anything more insightful than what Isa just said, but no, it's absolutely true. I think, you know, I think it's also important to say that, you know, yes, I applied for the program, and I did have, you know, I had some very sort of specific goals in mind of what I wanted to get out of it, but I equally went in being sort of, I wanted to make sure, and I mean, the moment that I met Isabella, it became all the easier to feel this way, but I wanted to make sure that I was open to being taken in any conceivable direction, you know. And I think probably the big thing that I would say is that, you know, again, hopefully you'll be in a situation, and I've no doubt if you're doing something with I Like Networking, you will, where your mentor and yourself are in an atmosphere that feels comfortable enough that you will ask any questions or raise any queries. But yeah, I'd say really don't hesitate. I mean, do be as transparent with them as you're comfortable in doing. You know, you don't want to get to the end of this and sort of go, and listen, it's also important to say, case in point, what we're doing right now, it's not sort of like the 4 months happen and then it's kind of like, okay, bye, see you never again. Thankfully, it's something that when there's, in any instance, when there's a meeting of like-minded people, you do really want to stay in touch. But yeah, I would say always ask, and there's no such thing as a stupid question, even if it seems like something super obvious. You know, really just ask away, because you don't want to look back and you know, and wish you had, I suppose.
Yeah.
Can I just add one thing?
Go, Isa.
Talking about time management, we were both horrible in that because our sessions were supposed to be 1 hour and we would be like 2.5 hours in, and we were still chatting away. So, you know.
No complaints, but also, yeah.
It was amazing. I mean, we enjoyed it, but we weren't maybe the best to talk about time management, because I think we really enjoyed each other, and many times we would do the session and then we'd just keep chatting away.
Yeah, maybe it's also, Isa, because you never talk to anyone. You spend all day looking at like that stuff, and so then you see a person that you have to use all your words. I don't know. No, I'm kidding. That's a good excuse. We can tell Brian that that's the situation. Okay, Vanessa has a very complicated question. I have no idea how you're going to respond to it, but all right, let's do this. So, as you mentioned, there aren't many positions within the museum sector, and more individuals are trying to create their own voices and businesses in order to be part of this discipline. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you think that as an independent curator, museums are open to the submission of curatorial proposals from students, aspiring curators, and how do you suggest one approach the curatorial team? So Isa, you can give your opinion and I can give mine if you want.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. Yeah. And thank you, Vanessa. That's a really, really good question. Two things that I think we need to understand, contextualize. First of all, the role of the curator in a museum and the role of the museum within society. So if you're talking about a national museum, national museums in this country, in the UK, they're funded by the government. So they have to abide to governmental policies, and they have to abide to certain standards and certain kind of responsibilities, because at the end of the day, they are public institutions to serve the public. If we're talking about, say, private collections, or, you know, a museum run privately, it's very different how they approach their responsibilities, their aims, you know, what they can do and cannot do with their money. For instance, because national museums or council-run museums they are funded publicly. You know, they have to control how they spend their money in certain ways that are dictated by people outside the museum. Yeah, so by trustees, there are usually politicians and so forth and so on. So, you know, it depends on the museum that you're approaching. Usually, national museums or museums that are publicly funded, the role of the curator is a very serious one, because it's basically the face of the museum and indirectly the face of the government. Right, there's a lot of diplomacy and policy in the role of the curator. So say a curator wants to do a particular exhibition, when they propose it, it has to be accepted by an external board. Right, it's never just a curator says, let's do an exhibition on this, and everybody goes, yay! You know, like there's a lot of things that a curator has to consider, and there are subjects that a curator might want to approach in the exhibition that might be vetoed by other stakeholders. So all that is, or you can see where I'm going here. Independent curators, they're not impossible in national or publicly funded museums, but it's very rare, and you have to come from you have to have a certain academic baggage to be able to do so. I know the V&A, say the Frida Kahlo exhibition, the V&A hosted a few years ago, that was actually proposed by an external person. She was an academic who, I think her PhD was actually on Frida Kahlo. So she came with a certain level of knowledge, expertise, and, you know, experience for the museum to then go to the museum. She proposed it, the museum accepted, and yet she was not the lead curator for the exhibition. It was somebody in the museum. It was a curator hired by the V&A that was in the V&A's payroll. She came as a consultant, even though it was her proposal, it was mostly her research. She came as a consultant, and that is because, yes, Claire Wilcox was the lead curator, but the person, I won't name the person, but she was the one who had come up with all the research, or most of the research, and she was the one who had the expertise and proposed. So it's not impossible for an independent curator to propose exhibitions or a book or a project with a museum, but depends on the museum. The chances are that your chances are bigger depending on the museum. For instance, now on the other scale, the Somerset House, they host a lot of exhibitions, a lot of fashion exhibitions, but they don't own their own collection. And I think collections are also a key factor when deciding to get an external person or not. Because the Somerset House, they don't have their own collections. They have a team of exhibition programmers and exhibition managers, but I would say 99% of their exhibitions are curated and developed by external people, independent people. So, you know, it depends on the institution, I think, more than your skills, the idea, the quality of your ideas, your expertise. I think more than that, what will make you a successful independent curator is where you are partnering, who you want to stage that exhibition, or who you want to collaborate with. Yeah, Belle, do you want to add anything?
I'm gonna say something. Vanessa, I don't know if you're interested in what type of curation you're interested in. I'd suggest you listen to our interview with Fato Zustek. She was a curator for Art Night. She's also a curator. She was the director of the Liverpool Biennial. So she's only mainly worked as an independent curator. She did Fig 2, which is the big, like 50 weeks curation exhibition at the ICA. I'll post the link on the chat. I see that you're messaging. But yeah, I would explain as well. I just add to Isabella that I agree. It's a lot harder on a lot of those museums. The structure inside is huge. So the curator not only deals with the concept, he manages the team, but also the whole loans system, the insurance, that like it's insane. It's like a massive bolt. Like it's like the Titanic, and independent curators work as like speedboats. You know, it's a very different structure. And I would say that in all of those cases, yeah, Somerset House works sometimes on a higher space as well situation, which you can if you have the bugs and stuff. But I feel like in most of those cases in the UK, for you to be a successful independent curator, you're gonna need a lot of connections in the art world. Even if you're very skilled, you still need to know who makes the decision making, because as Isa said, a lot of the decisions on who gets to use a space or not doesn't always depend on just the people who are interested in the content. It can depend a lot on like some sort of bureaucrat or some sort of director and so on.
Yeah,
So just
too many stakeholders.
Yeah, so just keep that in mind. I'll share the link to Fatos because yeah, that's exactly it, Sophie. Well spelled as well. But yeah, just I don't want anyone to feel discouraged, because Fatos came here, she needed a visa, she's from Turkey, you know, she studied maths and she's very successful, but it's just it can be a more tenuous sort of journey.
Yeah, and I mean,
that's my
I know a lot of very successful independent curators that never ever wanted to work with museums. That was never a part of their aspirations, and they have managed to build fantastic careers outside the museum environment. So a curator doesn't necessarily need to exist only in the museum. A curator, you know, you can exist in galleries, in private galleries, you can exist in auction houses, you can exist, you know, with, sometimes you just get the money. You get the money, you hire a space. I mean, when I first moved here, I worked with a curator called Shona Marshall. And Shona, she is an independent curator. She never worked with museums, but she is a very successful. And I remember we worked together in this exhibition, and she hired, it wasn't even a gallery, it was just an empty house in Pimlico, you know, and then she curated this exhibition and she got some funding. I mean, I didn't enjoy my experience there, not because of her or the exhibition, but because of what I was doing and where we were. But you know, like you don't need to be in a museum environment, and sometimes it's easier to be an independent curator if you don't want to operate within the restrictions and limitations that a museum environment will impose on you.
Thanks, Isa. I think we are wrapping up. So I would ask first you, Isa, to tell everyone a little bit about the course that you're doing with us in April, and also how people can find you. And then Amelia will close explaining the rest of her Instagram takeover for everyone, and then I'll finalize everything. But thanks so much, everyone. And Vanessa, I'm sending one more link for you in the chat, just FYI.
Yes, so based on my experience with Amelia, and knowing what somebody that wanted to work with dress collections in museum environments, the requirements that or the experiences that she was not getting because we're all locked, or many of us are locked, I decided to come up with a small course. It's a short course. It's only 6 sessions, about 5 sessions. Yes, I think we were considering 6 or 5, and we went with 5 to start with. But it's a 5-session course where I talked about the kind of key themes about working with collections. So we're going to look at, you know, first of all, what is the point of a collection, what the collections do. And then we're going to look at more practical aspects of working with collections. And it's all about an introduction. So when we get to be free again, you know, all this is over, and you do want to get, say, an internship or an initial experience in a museum, you can say, I do know what it is to be cataloging, I do know how to catalog, or I know the principles of working with the collection, and hopefully that will allow you to get those entry positions. So it's very much about introducing you to the world of working with collections. And that is, of course, that we starting in April.
Yeah, April 13th. It's sold out at the moment, but we are looking into doing another one next year.
Yeah, we will do another one, definitely.
Yeah, so, but just FYI. And
yeah.
Thanks so much, Isa. And for everyone who's here, if you want to apply to be mentored by Isa, she's part of our program again this year. And applications open on the 22nd of March. Subscribe to our newsletter to be in the loop. But yeah, or just stay alert on that date. But thanks so much, Isa, for being part of this. And Amelia, this is your event, so I'll stop hijacking it. Take it away.
Not at all. Not at all. No, honestly. I mean, I was just thinking that, I hope I can speak for anyone listening that if you're at all interested in or are already immersed in this field and the past, 50 minutes or so of Isabella talking hasn't convinced you to want to be your mentee, then, your willpower is just something I do not possess. I gotta be straight up about that. But no, it's just been an absolute joy as always chatting with you, Isabella. There's so many more bases that we could cover, but I think that's just the thing with people with similar interests. But yeah, absolutely. We are conducting this as part of my London Fashion Week takeover of the I Like Networking channels, for its opening day. We've barely scratched the surface on the content that we'll be rolling out over the day relative to what's been up on the channel. If you've looked at anything this morning, there's definitely a hell of a lot more to come alongside this conversation being recorded. So for anyone who wants to look back and get insights, I feel like I'll be doing that for some of the things Isabella was saying, then that'll be available too. We're going to have a conversation that I shot a couple of days ago with the wonderful Colin Horgan, an Irish designer who was based over in London for a number of years. He's back in Ireland now. That was an absolute joy to shot because I've been following his work for 8 years or so. So yes, that'll be on our YouTube channel. And yeah, we'll be looking at resources of, fashion practitioners to follow and really indispensable resources on decentering fashion. I know we didn't really have a chance to get into it here, but I think it's definitely a topic that we should try and unpack in a little bit more detail, maybe in a future session. And yeah, you can expect a load of color if this wasn't already apparent. There'll be a lot of different things in store. So yeah, thank you all so much for coming, and hopefully this is just the start of more to come.
100%. Thanks so much, Amelia. Very happy to have you as an ambassador to our community. And yeah, if anyone has any other questions about I Like Networking specifically, just message us. As I mentioned, you'll receive an email after this with all the links to the podcast, to Amelia, to Isabella, to me, everything. But yeah, you can find us pretty easily on I Like Networking everywhere. And this will also be uploaded to our YouTube so you can rewatch it many, many times. So thanks again, everyone. And I'll speak to you all soon. Congrats, Amelia. Well done. Thanks, Isa.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.